Matchmaker.fm connects podcasters and guests. Welcome to Matched, the show where we talk to some of the most incredible guests available for an interview right now. I'm your host, James Mulvany, founder of Matchmaker.fm, and this is Matched.
Hi, I'm Phil Pelucha, and you can find me on Matchmaker.fm.
Hi Phil, welcome to Matched. How's it going?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's been a while since we last spoke. We met quite a while ago, wasn't it? It was probably the start of lockdown when I first met you.
Yeah, start of lockdown when you came on the show at the start of lockdown as well. So that was it's been it feels like it's been about 5 years though, doesn't it, this year?
It does. It's been a funny one. All right, so welcome to Matched. We start always with a couple of icebreakers. So, my first icebreaker question for you is, if you could meet one dead celebrity, who would you choose to meet?
What a question. Here you go. Recent one, Diego Maradona. I always wanted to meet Diego Maradona. And that's now obviously not going to happen. Not in this life anyway.
Yeah.
I think he's mad as a box of frogs, but he's probably the most God-gifted person with a football ever. And I just think I think spending a couple of hours with Diego Maradona would be an experience you'd never forget. Cool.
Okay, next up, you've got to delete all the apps off your smartphone except for 3. Which ones are you going to keep?
Instagram, Spotify, and LinkedIn.
There we go. Generic answers, but I think, to be honest, mine would be very similar as well.
They're the ones I use. Everything else is just sorted into a folder.
All right, Phil, brilliant. So that we've got that out of the way. So if you wouldn't mind starting off, just tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what do you do?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I am the CEO and founder of Billionaires in Boxers. We're an entrepreneurial broadcast network, which is a very posh way of saying that we take businesses who are the best kept secret in their industry and help them to achieve authority status and be seen as recognized as an influencer and an authority in their space. Doing something you love, I'm sure, which is all content generation and content creation, primarily through podcasting and interviews and leveling up and networking with people at the upper echelons of your career and the upper echelons of your industry.
So you're actually on the TV as well, aren't you?
We are. So we do 2 radio shows and a TV series, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's grown from podcasting. I started podcasting, I always say over 10 years ago, but when I worked it out recently, it was 12 years ago, dude.
Wow.
I know, man. Like, nobody even knew what a podcast was back then.
No.
I always jokingly say, like, now there's no excuse not to podcast, because when you ask somebody now, like 9 times out of 10, they've got to have a really good reason to say no to coming on your podcast. Whereas back then, I might as well have been inviting people onto a police interrogation. It was like, who are you? What do you want? Why do you want to ask me this stuff? But yeah, over 10,000 hours of podcasting. That's led to live events, doing our books, 2 TV shows, 2 radio shows. We've got 1 TV show that's currently going at the moment. And we've just won funding for our first professional and business development movie that will be starting to be recorded at the end of 2021. So
wow.
I love it.
That's exciting. Yeah.
It's really cool.
Absolutely killing it. So tell us why you signed up to Matchmaker.
It's like a godsend, to be honest. I mean, if my life would have been so much easier if Matchmaker would have existed for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I think what I really like about it is it's a snapshot, right? Because when you're trying to find guests on LinkedIn and things like that, or even Facebook groups, somebody would give you like a one-liner pitch and then you get them on.
Yeah.
But it was really hit and miss. Like, some people were really great guests and you're like, oh, I didn't see this coming. And then other people were horrific. And you could say the same for shows. Like, I've been on shows where it's been like, I'm sure we'll get into this later, but I love these shows. Like, this is, I want to do business with these people. Like, your vibe attracts your tribe. We're talking to similar people. Like, we should do something together. And then likewise, I've been on shows that have just been utterly horrific. And being able to have that one sort of location where it's almost like a dating profile, isn't it? I can go on and see what they're all about. I can go and click on their podcast and listen to some episodes. Especially now you've added the video introduction and that piece at the top as well, where you physically see somebody almost do a mini pitch. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm all about. I'm all about working with people that you resonate with. So those things for me are massive because it's a very quick snapshot and taster of what it's all about.
And I completely agree. Like, it's funny, isn't it? Because sometimes you get a guest on, or you likewise you're on a guest on someone else's podcast, and it just flows naturally, and it's like effortless. And those are the interviews that count. They're the ones that like they're both enjoyable for yourself, the host, and also the guest. Makes it better for the listener. You know, it's just all around a win-win situation. But there are sometimes you go on and it's just like getting blood out of a stone, or you know, or someone who's interviewing you and they just don't quite understand you or don't quite get you, and it's like even sometimes as a guest you're trying to sort of speak, and either they're just like too rigid with the questions. So I think you're right. You've got to try and kind of find people that you resonate with. That's so important in podcasting, isn't it?
Massively, because there are so many podcasters out there, but if you also look at the stats of people who start a podcast and then drop it again, you know, there are lots of people who they go into this almost too rigid with a script, and it's not authentic. I mean, nothing against scripts, right? And they've got nothing against having set questions and all that kind of stuff. But it's the inability that I find to be authentic with it. Somebody says something interesting, don't just ignore what they've said completely and roll straight on to the next question. We might as well have just sent me the questions ahead of time and I'd have pre-recorded my answers. If somebody said something that sparks something in you, you know, dive deeper and go into that, because often it's when you go down that rabbit hole, you create the best content and the best relationships.
So what is your approach as a host then to treating these conversations? Do you have like a set format that you follow, and then you just, you know, you kind of use your active listening ability to then ask questions which kind of then help you go deeper? Yeah.
So I think it's good to have a basic structure. It's almost like a safety net, isn't it? So for me, it's always about, especially on Billionaires in Boxes, it's always about kind of tell me about your story and where you've come from. And there's a very logical reason behind that. A, that I want to know, and B, the audience need a reason to know why they should continue to listen. So it's about, here's who I am, here's where I've come from, and here's what I do. There are certain questions that I like to have kind of written down, but the amount of times I never get to them is unbelievable, because it does exactly as you just said. It goes one way and it's just really interesting. But it's kind of prodding and poking, and I personally like to kind of go to different places to a lot of people. A lot of people will talk to you about the sort of most successful period of their life. Knowing that I have a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs who listen to the podcast, I really like to talk about that hustle and grind part of your life. Like, how did you go from that, you were flat broke living in your car, to now you're really successful and you have this multi-million-dollar business? Yeah. It's like, don't just skip over that bit. That bit's the bit where most people are living their day to day. Let's see if we can share some golden nuggets and get some golden advice out of that era of your life.
I like when you said you've got sometimes too many questions, you don't even get to them. Because also I we always advise, or I try to always talk about just having, that's a good strategy to have, because the worst thing is sometimes, you do get a guest they're just giving really short answers, and it's good to have that fallback. I think, having too many questions is certainly better than not having enough.
For sure. I mean, and with the sort of SEO tools out there, aren't there, that allow you to kind of look for, also ask.com is a great one. So looking and seeing what people are searching for in relation to that particular subject. Because what that does is it doesn't just give you an endless list of questions. It gives you the most commonly asked questions on Google by your audience. So actually, this is what they want to ask about this industry. It's going to be very keyword friendly for your content. And it is nice to have a backlog of them there in terms of how's this going to work. Now, we've had this conversation before, but I also like to do a short 15-minute pre-call before I get a guest on my show. And the reason behind that pre-call is to try and determine some of these questions in advance. Is there any way that you want us to be guiding this conversation? Is there any particular golden nuggets of advice that you want to give that I should really kind of steer in that direction? And again, it kind of shows you what sort of show you're going to be in for. Like, if this person isn't very forthcoming with their answers and it's very short, it's going to be one of those shows that you need quite a few questions. But most of the time, that 15-minute call turns into a half an hour call that we're like, stop, we're wasting all the gold. We need to get on air.
And also, obviously, so you have your podcast and you show Billionaires in Boxes. I'm assuming as well you've been a guest on some others. So yes. Tell us a little bit about that.
So it's been a really interesting journey, actually. So I love podcast guesting on other people's shows, because you never know who you're going to meet. You never know who's going to be listening. You never know where it's going to lead. I had one a few weeks ago where one of my clients in the States, they just started working with these really large media brands. Right. And they were like, well, we've been on this guy's show. So they sent my show to this media company to have a listen to the interview. And off the back of that, I got invited onto a podcast that USA Today is setting up.
Wow.
And it was like, how did that happen? It's like, oh, I heard your show with this guy. I really like the way that you operate. Let's come on and have a chat. I've got a guy coming on the show in a few weeks. I was originally on his show. He does podcasting for Forbes, and he writes articles on Forbes about podcasting. So it's been all kinds of stuff like that. But for me, some of the best ones have been, I'll give him a bit of a shout out, actually. There's a podcast I met on Matchmaker called Survival Guide to Life. Now, the reason I really like these guys is I like the name of the podcast for a start. I like their flow. I like kind of how they talk and how they discuss things. But what was sort of most fascinating was they became a customer of mine. And then about a month into it, the guy and his business partner came back to me. They run a marketing business on the side and said, we don't want to be a customer anymore. We want to be part of Billionaires in Boxers. How can we kind of combine what we do with what you do? We feel like we've got a different aspect. You've got the content generation and the strategy piece, the whole relationship building on authority, but we know how to repurpose that content. We can be the people who do that for you. We can share that out. And they've subsequently joined the Billionaires in Boxers team, which would not have happened without podcasting.
Yeah, so it's about building a network and creating joint ventures
for sure,
versus just saying, like again, we've spoken a couple of times since we had our original podcast. We're recording again now.
Yeah,
this is the thing. There is this great community, and there is this great opportunity to meet people that and get to know them on a deeper level that otherwise you probably wouldn't. Like, it's not the same as just exchanging a few emails backwards and forwards.
No,
which is kind of like the old way of doing business. Now this is actually, you're recording your thoughts. It's a sort of, you're getting a double whammy because you're recording your thoughts, you're generating good quality content for your audience, but then also, when you press stop on the recorder, you've got a great relationship there that you can follow up on.
Yeah, I often use the phrase that business is a team sport. And one world-class individual will always get beaten by a team of really good professionals. And podcasting has essentially become kind of like my networking and recruitment tool to build that team, if you will, both for people internally and for partners. So my attitude is always that I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I don't want to have to learn everything. I know what we're good at and I know what our partners are good at. So if there's an aspect of our business that we want to add to this, I'm going to go and find somebody that we resonate with on a podcast who does that side and see if we can't all combine together. Because then if you've got 5 or 6 businesses, each at the top of their game for their bit, and we're now working as a collective, we are far much stronger than we would have been as individuals.
Okay, cool. And so what sort of types of podcast, if someone wants to reach out to you on Matchmaker, what's the sort of podcast that you want to appear on?
Anything business and marketing related, absolutely. Yep. I love the kind of whole entrepreneurial stuff. More you'll have heard from my interviews. I'm more than happy to kind of talk about anything in terms of whether that's the nitty gritty of what we do now, or whether that's the hustle and grind of how we got there, or even my beginnings as a football player and then moving into being a surveyor. Whatever works for people. I also must admit, I do enjoy a good spiritual discussion on a podcast. So some of these sort of spirituality, meditation, positive affirmation podcasts, I really enjoy delving into those conversations. Those people are definitely my tribe.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. And also, if you could be on anyone's podcast in the world, like think as big as you want, whose would you like to be on?
Ooh, good question. I mean, the obvious one is Joe Rogan, isn't it? Because everybody wants Joe. But I reckon, again, I think that'd be a really cool conversation. But actually, I think I've been seeing Tony Robbins do much more and more recently. And again, he's somebody who I've had a lot of admiration for as I've sort of been building through my work. So I think doing a pod with Tony would be an awesome experience. He's seems like a very
high energy guy.
He's full of energy. That's exactly what it's about.
Yeah.
Cool. And you know what? There's been people who, if you'd have asked me that a couple of years ago, I'd have had different answers. I'd have probably mentioned several people from, let's say, The Secret movie, for example, because I love that movie.
Oh, yeah, great. Of course. Forgot about that.
We now work with several of those people. Right. So they've been on my show, I've been on theirs. We do live events with them. So actually, but that all came about through podcasting. So when I preach like the power of podcasting, the fact that I think a podcast is more important for a business than a website, like I genuinely mean what I'm saying. Like it's such a powerful tool. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of where Facebook was right at the very beginning, where you could make money, you could have a lot of success, you could build that audience, you could build that crowd, all without needing to spend tons and tons of money.
Yeah, organic reach.
Very
basically.
much so. Very much so. But it won't be like that forever. It's already starting to change. So people need to take the action and get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, that leads me nicely to the sort of final question, which is like, what advice would you give to a business? I mean, obviously you're passionate about entrepreneurs and sort of small business. What advice would you give to someone who's looking to start a podcast, particularly for a business reason?
Yes, it would be get started, I think, is probably the best thing to say, and have a strategy of people that you want to speak to, right? Because what I think a lot of people do is they'll go, I'd love to have Gary Vaynerchuk on my podcast. And then when Gary V doesn't respond to them, they get all disappointed and disheartened. Yeah. But it's think of it as sport. You've got to work your way through the leagues, right? You've got to win a number of League One games to get promoted to the Championship. Then you've got to win the Championship to get into the Premier League. Now you can win some of the lower end of the Premier League games, but if you want to challenge the guys at the top, you're going to have to work really hard. And the best way to do that is by networking with the people who those people network with. So who is Gary V interviewing with? Who's he looking at? Who are those people? And
who's on his team, etc.
Exactly. And if you start...
it's a really good analogy. I've never thought of it like that, like going up through the sort of league tables of sport, but you're completely right. It is it's very, very similar.
Oh, and you know what? The Premier League teams, if you want to look at it that way, are going to feel far more comfortable giving you a game and thinking that they're going to have a good game if they can see that you've won a load of championship games and you've been winning the lower end of the Premier League games. So, take Gary as an example, right? If I interview 5 or 6 of Gary's team and his friends, the likelihood of me interviewing Gary has just gone up at least 5 times.
There we go. So that's great advice.
Definitely get started and do it that way for sure.
Cool. All right, Phil, thanks very much for your time today. Just to finish up, if people want to find out more about Billionaires and Boxers, if people want to reach out to you, how can they do so?
Well, I'm on matchmaker.fm, so definitely come check me out there and say hello. My profiles are all on there. You can also head over to our website, which is billionairesinboxers.com. I also have a really unusual surname, so I kind of own the SEO for my name. So if you search for Phil Pelucha, which is Pelucha on Google, you will find all of my social media pages. Come and say hello to me, however feels best.
Thanks very much, Phil.
Thank you for having me.
There is an easier way to get booked onto more podcasts as a guest. Join matchmaker.fm for free today and start making connections with podcasters who are looking for guests just like you.